The Dale Show. Hello, everybody. It's me, Dale. I feel like I should have a name for my fans, all 100 million of them, but I'll figure that out later. Welcome to episode 6, the third and final installment of the Templar Knights series. I still laugh every time. Yeah, I still laugh every time I think about the fact I was going to do all of this Templar Knight stuff in 1 hour episode, and it ended up being 3 over 1 hour episodes each. But so we left off right after, like, last time we talked, it was 1290s. The Templar Knights were kicked out of the Holy Land, Israel, and all that stuff. And then so the Templar Knights and the Hospitallers are hanging out in Constantinople, trying to figure out what their next step is. Back home in France, the Pope and King Phillip IV, Pope Clement V, and who's based out of Avignon, France, and King Philip and all the other kings who are kind of like, the kings aren't really in charge of the Templars, but they're like, we don't want to support you anymore, since the whole reason you were invented was to defend the Holy Land and the pilgrims of the Holy Land. And now it's all done and we're not in there anymore. So that's where we're at. The Templar Knights are hanging out in Constantinople, which is modern day Istanbul, which every time I say that, I have to stop myself from singing that They Might Be Giants song. So they're sitting there, they're trying to figure it out. The Templar Knights, I think, they're like, we kind of want to start another crusade. I guess the last one was the 7th one or so. They're like, we can't just give up on the Holy Land. But they're like broke from all the other crusades. They're kind of like just hanging out. They're doing a little bit of stuff back in like Europe.
Wait, so what year? What year are we talking again?
Well, we ended, I think they got kicked out in 1298. So we're right around the turn of the century. Here, let me just look up in my notes to see when the last, yeah, I kind of lost it in my old notes because I kind of pushed all my old notes down so I could start the notes for episode 3. But if you're listening to this, you probably just listened to episode 1 and 2. So I'm thinking it's 1298 they got kicked out, but it doesn't really matter because nothing really happens until 1305. And one thing, I mentioned it before, but the kings of like Europe, Germany, Italy, France, Portugal, Spain, all these guys, they're kind of like losing patience with the Templar Knights. And so King Philip from France, he's the main guy. He's the main actor. He's actually the guy who fucking killed the order. So, which I'll get into, but they want to merge. What's that?
I just double checked, and yeah, so it looks like 1298. You were right. That was when the Templar Knights, Knight Templars. Actually, they wrote Knight Templars here. Had to withdraw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the fact check.
And this is the very moment the King of France chose to get rid of the order.
Okay, Andrea.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just
spoilers.
No, you just said that.
I know.
That source is discoverwalks.com. I cannot verify if that's accurate.
That's true.
But
all you need to know is,
wanted to check a year for you. Yeah.
Okay. All you need to know right now is that tensions are building between everybody else and the Templar Knights. They want to merge the Templar Knights and the Knight Hospitaller, and King Philip came up with this idea to merge the two and then not let one of the grand masters from either of them run them. He wants to have like a king appointed person. I think he was angling for his son to run the new conglomeration. So of course, the Templar Knights and the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, both were against this because they kind of liked their autonomy. Shouldn't have just tried to bust out a big word. And so in 1305, the Pope Clement V, based in Avignon. I'm just going to read sort of. I took down notes off of Wikipedia because it's kind of like a good summation of everything. So I'm just going to read a quick paragraph to set us up. Are you cool with that? Do you like listening to me read out loud? All those times in grade 4 when I practiced reading out loud so I wouldn't embarrass myself are finally going to pay off today because I put down a lot of stuff because I was just wanted to make super sure I didn't forget anybody's names or any dates or anything. So here we go.
I appreciate the accuracy. Also, I'm glad you practiced all your life for this moment.
Who would have known that at 42, the culmination of all my reading out loud in elementary school would finally come on my very own podcast about the Templar Knights.
Sometimes I forget you're in your 40s and then you say it and I'm like, oh yeah, right.
Because I seem so much older because I'm wise, right? I seem like I'm 102 because I'm a sage old master of wisdom.
Yeah. And like how when you bend over, stuff cracks too.
And I groan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I digress. Back to me reading. So, in 1305, the new Pope Clement V, based in Avignon, France, sent letters to both the Templar Grand Master Jacques Demolay and the Hospitaller Grand Master Fulk de Villariet to discuss the possibility of merging the two orders. Neither was amenable to the idea, but Pope Clement persisted, and in 1306 he invited both Grand Masters to France to discuss the matter. So good at reading out loud. Demolay arrived first in early 1307, but de Villariet, I should have practiced this name. I got it right the first time, but I kind of tripped up because I felt like I added an extra syllable or not. Okay, so
this is in France, though, right?
We're in France, they're going. Both the Grand Masters were hanging out in Constantinople.
Oh yeah.
And the Pope's like, "Yo, come to France. We need to discuss this shit." And they're like, "We don't want to." And he's like, "Please." And then they're like, "Okay." So Demolay gets there a year later because that's how long it took to just fucking get anywhere. They're like,
right.
Yeah, they sent him a letter and then they're like, "Cool. I'll see you in a year." So Demolay's in France in early 1307, but Villariet, why was I having so much problem with that? It's okay. So de Villariet was delayed for several months. I think he had an old-timey sickness.
Old-timey? Just yeah. That's what we call it, eh?
Well, because the diseases back like then, cholera? They just say they were like cholera. No.
That's old-timey.
Because most of these notes from this book I listened to that I mentioned before, he wrote his book based off of personal journals, and in a lot of them they're just like he was stricken ill because it was the Dark Ages and they didn't know what diseases were,
and it was polluted. Everything was polluted because people were shitting in their own, I don't know, I guess not in their water. People do that now. We just
actually this is back in the time when they had poop rivers in all the cities. Yeah. So people would just poop in buckets in their house and then they would dump them out the window or like go and then down like in London, England, in the middle of the city, they had like a poop river that would just flow and you dump their buckets in there. And then they had people whose sole job was they had these big long sticks and they would poke at the poop rivers to like break up the chunks so that they would flow properly. So basically people were disgusting, and that's what I mean by old timey illness was, like you said, they probably just got fucking poisoned or all of that stuff because they had poop rivers and it was really gross.
Yeah. I'm not sure when they had the poop river though, because I know they had different systems
Well,
going
I know for
at
sure
different times.
they for sure had the poop rivers during the Black Plague, and the Black Plague started, or bubonic plague, I guess some people don't call it the Black Plague, but that started like 30 to 40 years after what we're talking about, because I think that started around 1330, and they definitely had it during that. Okay, so while Villeray is like sick and not there, um, Demolay and Clement are discussing the criminal charges that had been made 2 years earlier by an ousted Templar and were being discussed by King Philip IV of France and his ministers. It was generally agreed that the charges were false, but Clement sent the king a written request for assistance in investigations. According to some historians, King Philip, who was already deeply in debt to the Templars from his war against England, decided to seize upon the rumors of his own purposes. He began pressuring the church to take action against the order as a way of freeing himself from his debts. So, most likely, what they're talking about was there's this guy named Eskine of Florin, and he was just like, basically, I guess you would call him a con artist now. He was just a guy who was always in trouble in the law, and he was actually in jail a couple years before this, like 1303 or whatever. He was in jail with a Templar Knight, and that Templar Knight, because that Templar Knight had run away from the order and he had given up, and so he was like charged with heresy for like turning his back on the church. So they put him in a jail cell with this guy named Eskine from Florin. And the Templar Knight, like, this isn't like substantiated, like I was mentioning before. Everything comes from like notes and journals and stuff. So basically, so they're going off the word of this Eskin of Florin, and he was basically trying to sell this story because he was a huckster. So he was like, hey, I know all this dirt on the Templar Knights. Does anybody want to buy this information off me and sell a salacious book? Because even though people were kind of animus against the Templar Knights because they had lost the Holy Land, they were still everywhere in Europe, and they were still like holy and on behalf of the church, and they're still kind of like acting like knights and keeping order and stuff. So they were still really entrenched within society, and like people would see them every day. So a lot of people would like write stuff about the knights, and then like make little, like, I guess they were called like leaflets or something. They were like little books that were only like 50 pages long or whatever. So this guy was trying to sell one of those, and he was saying that the Templar Knight that he was in jail with was telling him about how the Templar Knights had all these like weird um rituals and stuff that were secret from society, and they were salacious because they were like guys kissing each other on the mouth. Apparently they were saying that they spit on the cross, which is a big no-no, and they're saying that some of them even did sodomy on each other, which considering how much people are still fighting for gay rights today, I don't think it was very welcome in 700 years ago. And actually, you were like, I think you were
Uh,
just thrown in jail. Yeah. Yes. Question in the back, ma'am.
this will be kind of silly. I
Mm-hmm.
forget what sodomy is. I don't. I forget.
Are
What
you
is it?
serious?
Yes, I forget. Or I
I
maybe
mean,
never knew. I
I
know I've
mean,
heard the word, but just remind me. What
it
is
is
it?
anal sex.
Oh,
It is the nice way of
all right.
saying anal sex.
That isn't really. That's totally like what. That word is so like you'd never guess from.
Yeah,
Very well hidden.
I think the word itself comes from the city Sodom and Gomorrah, because they would sodomize each other because they were
Right.
like
Oh, because
into
it's
that stuff.
considered A sin,
a
right?
sin. Yeah. So
Yeah.
in
Okay.
legalese, they don't say, hey, this guy's guilty of having anal sex with another guy. He's guilty of
Mm.
sodomy. So
Do you want to hear what the Chicago Tribune had to say about what that?
sure. I would love to hear what the Chicago Tribune has to say about anal
It says
sex.
this article is sodomy, the legalities and the realities. And the excerpt that comes up when you just Google what sodomy is an increasing number of Christian scholars also subscribe to the view that Sodom's sin was inhospitality and pride. Over time, the term sodomy came to include oral genital contact between persons of the same sex, anal genital and oral genital contact between those of the opposite sex, and bestiality. So it could include all of those.
Oh,
I guess that's what where we
well,
are on
in
that
this
today.
instance, I thought it was strictly pee pee and butthole. But in this instance, when we're
Nice
talking about the
terminology.
Templar Knights, it is dudes having sex with other dudes in their butts.
Mhm.
Probably maybe their mouths too, but I was just talking about their butts because they
Okay.
were accused of having sex with each other's mouths as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Aren't you glad you just signed up to listen to this history podcast and we just had a whole little sidebar about having sex with each other's mouths and butts?
No, you had the sidebar. You felt the need to go into that
I could talk
particular.
about
Let's not.
ancient knights having
Let's not.
sex with each other easily for an hour straight,
Yeah.
but I won't. I'll digress again and get back on chart. Oh, one thing I also wanted to mention, it was like
Wait, I just
so
want to say this for clarity.
yeah.
It's fine, just in case anybody thinks that the joke is that it's about homosexuality, but that's fine. Neither of us care.
Mm-hmm.
The joke is just that we got into pornography on a history, like,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
That we're
yeah.
making jokes about it being pornographic, not
Oh yeah.
anything to
There's
do with
there's definitely nothing wrong with two. Like I mean, I'll describe what they were saying they did. Okay, I'll just describe it now because we're talking about it. So what they were saying was that at when a new brother was sworn in to be a Templar Knight, they would have to go to this dark room and they would have to strip naked and they would have to they would get kissed. Here, I wrote it down. It's like they would kiss. So, excuse me, sorry. The new brother who was signing in, they would say being a Templar Knight's gonna suck. Are you okay with that? Yes, I'm okay with that. And then they would have this dialogue. And then once he was like, okay, you're in, they would kiss the guy on the back on the base of the spine, kiss him on the navel, and then kiss him on the mouth. And that sounds kind of sexy if you're doing this
Yeah,
all by candlelight
I
and you're
remember
just
you explaining that to me.
in a castle. I mean,
I
peak
actually just,
romance.
yeah, I actually just want to know like why those particular places, if they think there's like some specific energy.
Yeah,
Because where
like
was it on the base of the spine? Where and where?
the base of the spine, which I guess would be right
Your
by your
cogix.
butt.
Yeah, I think it's
Where's
called your
that? Where's your
cogix.
cogix? Is that the bottom of your
Your
tailbone?
tail. Yeah, I think so. Which
So
I do think stores, not stores energy, but I'm sure I've heard things that are
oh yeah.
related to it.
Well, that's
Um,
probably why, because one of the things that
probably on
they're
the nerve
saying that the
ending.
Templar Knights, that since they were around for 200 years and all their stuff was secret, they're alluding to the fact that maybe they got into magic and stuff from Eastern mysticism and stuff, because back then that was one of the big things that the Christian church was terrified of, was that, I mean, even if you read the Bible, God was always telling Moses and stuff, he's like, don't start worshiping other gods, don't believe their magic, and don't start marrying their women because you won't be able to help yourself. So it's there's always been this inbound fear that Christians will be tempted by magic and stuff. So I think that would be one of the reasons why they were so like it. like, of course it was the homosexuality back then because they were totally against that, but it also had to do with like, is this a weird spirit magic thing? Because, and I guess the navel would be like hold a lot of energy too, and then the mouth is the mouth. And then they would say that the brothers would spit on the cross and denounce Christ. But I was reading this in my reading on Wikipedia today. I found out that the brothers would teach each other how to renounce God with words and not their heart, so that if they were ever captured and like forced to denounce Jesus by like mercenaries or something, that they had already taught themselves how to do it without saying, like, they could say I renounce Jesus, but they like would teach themselves that they didn't mean it. But like King Philip was like, yeah, right, you guys are doing heresy. So
Yeah.
yeah. And then also I wanted to point out that because one of the main reason I think that King Philip had a hard on to end the Templars was because he owed them a lot of money. I mentioned that in that opening paragraph. And one of the reasons this is true is because he also in 1306 he kicked all the Jewish people out of France because he owed them a whole lot of money from the same war with England that he had. And um but it was like they hated back then they hated the Jewish money lenders a lot more than the Templar Knights lending them money, because the Templar Knights, by Christian faith, weren't allowed to lend money and take interest on it. But Jewish people didn't have that kind of stipend in their religion. And that's basically the main reason why throughout history Jews have always been marginalized, because they would lend money to kings and stuff, and then they would charge them a whole bunch of interest, and then the kings would hate them and then kind of dehumanize them as a way to get out of their debt. So this Philip bastard, he had already, like the year before, he had already kicked out all the Jewish people unjustly just so he wouldn't have to pay them back, and now he's doing the same thing to the Templar Knights. So where was I? Okay. So what he does is, while Demolay's in France discussing the merging of the two things with Pope Clement, Philip IV issues these secret orders to go all around France that on Friday the 13th at dawn they would arrest every Templar Knight that's in France, but they kept it on the hush hush. And why this is where some people believe the term why Friday the 13th considered bad luck, because basically the King of France screwed over the Knights of God and Christ just so he could get out of his debt.
I was about to ask if that was the start of Friday the 13th. Yeah.
It's one of the theories. I don't know. It's kind of like one of those things where some people are like, this is totally where it came from. And then other people are like, no, it's not. So that's why I say it's one of the possible theories of where Friday the 13th came from. So I don't have to attach myself to any way, super hard or not.
Okay.
So Philip IV has over 100 charges against the Templar Knights, and then he starts torturing them. And one
Not a
thing that
fan of torture.
no, and back then it was like,
Even
because
hearing about it.
nowadays people know that if you torture someone, they'll just say whatever you want them to say just to stop the torture. But back then it was still kind of like they didn't know that yet. And
Yeah.
and if you were keen on episodes 1 and 2 and you're like, wait, the Templar Knights don't have to answer to kings because of one of the papal bulls that the Pope put out. But here's the loophole. If a king is arresting someone on heresy, like crimes against the church, it supersedes everybody's authority. So the only reason he was able to arrest all the knights was because he was arresting them on charges of heresy, among the other charges. Um, so yeah, so he has 100 different charges, including heresy, homosexual relations, spitting and urinating on the cross. Most of these were dubious, like we all can guess. Like even if you didn't know there, even if like him taking all the Jewish people out and then doing this didn't make you think they were dubious. He also leveled all these same charges at the Cathars before this. And many of his enemies, he would do this too. He would be like, "Oh, you're charged with heresy and stuff," because that was like his personal favorite loophole. Because
Yeah.
the thing with, and this is the fucked up thing, this is what actually ended up screwing over all of the Templar Knights, was because you could charge them with heresy and you could torture them, and then you could then if people like if I okay, so King Philip has arrested these Templar Knights and he's torturing them, and he tells them, and that's like, let them know that if they confess to their sins, then they won't be killed, but they'll just be kept in jail for heresy. But if they denounce their sins, like say, I didn't mean that, it was a false confession, then it's considered a return to heresy, and then they get killed. So it's like this weird, like kind of a trap that he led them into. Sorry, I'm just reading through my notes. I'll just
Yeah.
read it. I mean,
Do what you
I'll
gotta
just
do.
I'll just keep reading this because it's better than me being like and trying to read through it and not say it. Okay, so um Philip had earlier kidnapped Pope Boniface the eighth, sorry, extra line in there, and charged him with nearly identical offenses. What happened was, when I said newly Pope Clement the Fifth, was that what he was? Yeah, Clement the Fifth. He had just become Pope because Pope Boniface the Eighth, Philip like arrested him with heresy and all the same crimes, and then threw him in jail and stuff. But while he was in jail, Pope Boniface kind of died because he's this like super old man Pope, and it was never like directly linked to him. Like it was never said that he was tortured to death. They just kind of said that he died of old age. So he's dead, and then Clement takes over. Sorry, later on, Philip digs up Pope Boniface's dead body to kind of like sour his whole legacy, and he charges his corpse with all these crimes too. And then okay, so where are we? Yet Malcolm Barber observes that historians find it difficult to accept that an affair of such enormity rests upon total fabrication. So basically, this other historian was saying, yes, it's made up because Philip said did all this stuff to the Pope and the Cathars, but the sheer enormity of these crimes may, and like how big the whole situation was, Philip wouldn't risk that much pushback from the public, because overall mostly the public loved the Templar Knights. So he would so this Malcolm Barber, this historian, is saying that he wouldn't have risked this put much pushback if there wasn't something there. There's this thing called the China Parchment. Here, let me sorry, I gotta jump ahead in my notes to tell you what the China Parchment is, because it comes up again later. This is a brief description of what the China Parchment is because I just referenced it before. So in September 2001, a document known as the China Parchment, dated 1720, the 17th
Wait,
to the 20, what?
how do you spell that? The what in parchment?
China, Chinon
Okay.
Parchment.
Oh, China. That's what you're saying? China?
Hmm.
Okay.
And this is dated the 17th to 20th of August, 1308. So this was like while all the Templar Knights were in jail. This was discovered in the Vatican secret archives by one Barbara Frail, because somebody had put it in the wrong spot. So Somebody in 1628 was reading this China Parchment, and then they put it back in the wrong spot, and then it took like 380 years for them to find it again by accident. So I kind of want to get into these secret Vatican archives if they're that big, where you could just lose a parchment for 300 years. Just think of all the juicy secrets that are in there. Juicy secrets, forbidden knowledge. It's my favorite.
Yeah, true though. Very
Yeah.
true. Probably not uh, in English though, not easily readable.
Oh yeah, it's probably like a lot of Latin, and these would have all been in French, which an old timey French, which is even harder apparently. But a
Apparently,
total
you know, a lot
side
of people
note.
trying to translate old timey French. Eh?
Apparently, on a complete side note, there's a lot of UFO and alien shit in these secret files, because apparently aliens didn't show up for the first time in the 50s. They've been around the whole time, and the church has kept records on it because because one of the things the Vatican has to do is they have to keep track of everything that would test someone's faith. So they have every documented thing from like the Middle Ages and stuff about all these um aliens and shit. And if you want to learn more about that, you can read the book called what is it? America Cosmic by Dr. Diana Pasulka. It's a very good book. I do have to say that the audiobook has a terrible narrator, and it was very hard to listen to, but if you push through, there's a lot of good stuff in there about aliens and the crossover between aliens and the Catholic Church, which is even sexier than these Templar Knights kissing each other on their spine and navel, because it is so good. Okay, back to explaining what these China parchments are. So these China parchment is dated 17th to 20th of August 1308, and it is a record of the trial of the Templars and shows that Clement absolved the Templars of all heresies in 1308. I kind of got ahead of myself there. I kind of gave away a bit of the happy ending, and that was that Pope Clement actually, all these guys who were getting tortured and stuff, he kind of absolved them and said that he restored their sacraments. So basically they could all go to heaven in 1308, 2008. So yeah, he said that all the Templar Knights that had, because what happened, okay, I'll go back to my other notes. Actually, since I'm at this part of my notes, I'll give away my happy ending. I was going to tell you later that the current position of the Roman Catholic Church is that the medieval persecution of the Knights Templar was unjust, that nothing was inherently wrong with the order or its rule, and that Pope Clement was pressed into his actions by the magnitude of the public scandal and by the dominating influence of King Philip IV. I was going to tell you that at the end, but since I kind of brought up the China Parchment in 2001, I figured I'd give you a little happy ending, pre-happy ending. Yeah. So basically, I'll go back to 1307, dive back into what's going on. The whole time that King Philip is torturing all these Templar Knights, King Clement, even though he's kind of under the thumb of, not King Clement, sorry, Pope Clement V, is kind of under the thumb of Philip IV, because scandal alert, they're fucking related, and King Philip actually got him or helped him get to be the Pope, because when King Philip IV, the dickhead that he is, fucked with Pope Boniface, he was kind of like, yo, this Pope Boniface the Eighth, he's doing heresy, but you know who isn't? My boy fucking Clement over here. Maybe make him the Pope. So they do. And then Clement's like, oh, thanks. And then, of course, King Philip, the asshole that he is, he's like, now I'm going to get the Templar Knights. And then Clement's hands are kind of tied. But what Clement does is, it's also kind of another loopholey thing. So since King Philip has all the Templar Knights arrested under heresy, and they're all on there. He's like, they're kind of in the jurisdiction of the King of France. So, where was I in these notes? Okay.
Okay. While you're looking for stuff, I just want to point out how many F words you use there. That was really,
Of course, I
really,
use F words. This is
really
exciting stuff.
enthusiastic.
Oh
Very
man,
enthusiastic.
I'm so into this right now. It's funny
Added to the
because it's
drama.
like since I've been doing this for like over a month, like just reading about the Templar Knights and stuff, it's like I'm right into it, and I'm like, because at first, like before I started doing all this Templar Knights, I thought they were like some shady douches, like the Illuminati and stuff. So I thought they were like the bad guys who were like secretly running bad stuff from behind the scenes, which apparently that's what King Philip IV thought too. And then King Philip IV comes in, and he's just like such a clean cut bad guy. Like in all the movies, he'd be like the corrupt king who's like, yes, people don't matter. I'm a sociopath. I just like money and stuff. So once he enters the picture, I'm like, oh no, these Templar Knights, they're the they're good old boys. They're hearts of gold. They never did anything wrong, even though they're like doing this weird financial stuff, which was one of their charges behind the scenes, and kind of building power. And they kind of secretly might have had a secret society going, and their main goal was to set up kind of their own country, which, spoiler alert, comes into play later, where they think they came to the Americas and are secretly the people who made the USA.
That's conspiracy though, right? That's
oh yeah, that's not provable, and that's not provable because there's no proof of it. But that
unless
Scott Walters guy I mentioned, that Scott Andrea,
what?
just let me finish the sentence. That Scott Walters guy who I mentioned in the first two shows, he was talking a lot about that conspiracy. So sorry, I cut you off. What were you trying to say?
That if we knew what their DNA, they had a specific kind of DNA, we could like DNA test. But they probably wouldn't be genetically any different, really.
No, yeah, because they accepted people from all walks of life. Like anybody could just swear themselves to the church and become a Templar Knight.
Yeah. The vision I have when you say they're all good guys is a bunch of Captain Americas walking around.
Right? Yeah, I think you mentioned that in the first episode.
I know, that's why
it
came back. I was like, oh, right, the Captain America. Yeah, just a bunch of Captain Americas.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Anyway. Ooh, no, really.
So let's go back to the torturing, and here's another good interesting tidbit. Sorry to jump around and stuff, but I don't know. I guess if you're on episode 6 of my podcast, The Dale Show, you're used to me jumping around by now. Hopefully, if this is your first episode, please go back and listen to at least the first 2 Templar Knights so you can kind of get all the backstory for this. But what I want to jump into next is one of the other charges was idol worship. The weird part about it is the way they described it was they were worshiping a head with a long beard, and it's like, that's the only description, is just like this head. So
like a real head though, or a statue head?
They never say. Some people say it could have been like just a carved head. Some other scholars even said it could have been the mummified head of John the Baptist from year 1 AD, who was like the guy who went around and being like, yo, the Son of God is coming. And then Jesus like recognized John. It's like that John, the John who hung out with Jesus John. They think that
baptized. Did he not baptize?
Yeah, he baptized Jesus.
Baptize him. Yeah.
So they're saying that maybe this head that they worshipped was his head that they had got from the original, because they had gotten that and a bunch of other like relics. Like They had a piece of the true cross, which was supposedly the cross that Jesus was crucified on. They had some of the crown of thorns that he wore when he was crucified, and then
Hmm.
they just had other remnants of like popes and
Like they
stuff.
actually had that stuff? They know they had it? Or are you saying some people are saying they think they had it?
Well, the way this works is, like I keep saying, they go by journals of historians, because it's
Okay.
like there
Mhm.
was no written down history of the Knights Templar, because I think they had some books that were destroyed in the 1600s by some attackers or whatever. But what survived were some of these journals of like amateur historians. So basically what they found was the podcasts of the 14th century, where people like, it would be like people finding this podcast in a couple hundred years and being like, well, he said it happened, so it happened, I guess. So
Very important to cite your sources for that reason,
yeah,
folks.
that's why I keep saying, look, we don't know if this is fact, but people said it happened. And Occam's razor, if people said it happened, no, Occam's razor is the most likely thing to happen, is probably the actual, actually Occam's razor is just the most plausible, or the most, what's the right wording of this? The most plausible solution is the solution. So basically whatever makes the most sense is probably the actual answer. That was a terrible joke, but so I guess, did they have pieces of the actual cross? We don't know. Like, we don't even know for sure if Jesus was Jesus. Like, there's no scientific like proof that Jesus was Jesus and did all these miracles. It's just people said he did. And I guess it's kind of just funner if you say that people had the piece of the cross and it had magical powers. But yeah, like, this is one of those, before when I was mentioning that Christians were scared of people kind of getting tempted by magic. This could be one of those things where they're like, they treated these relics like they were magical items. Like there was one king, it doesn't matter who it was. It was like forever ago. It was like, one of the things one of the Templar Knights did was he took a ring and he rode to 4 holy sites in the Holy Land, and he touched the ring to each of those, and then he sent it back to like some king in Germany who was bedridden. But like, that's how superstitious and much they believed in relics. So, I mean, if you had the severed head of John the Baptist, that would be a pretty powerful artifact. And then, but one of the weird things was, this is totally an aside, was I don't even know if I should bring this up. Well, I have to bring it up now that I brought it up. I'll have to bring it up now that I brought it up. Totally. But a bearded Caucasian head could be a clue to, there's this race of people like 13,000 years ago that John Graham Hancock talks a lot about, that
Mhm.
the Quetzalcoatl's based off of. And they're basically like 10-foot tall. The way they're described is they're 10-foot tall dudes with beards. So that's why, like, when they said it was a head with a beard, that's what it reminded me of, because that's the only description of it.
Hmm.
But who knows? Like, one bad thing about getting into conspiracy theories is you start putting the little red yarn and connecting it to other stuff, and it doesn't necessarily always connect. Like how I put
Yeah.
this head with a
Mhm.
beard connected to this other thing. That's totally on me.
You
Nobody else
know,
said that.
that's my theory in general for really how people even come to conspiracy theories or anything. I don't when history is so vast and so long and we know so few things, I find
Mhm.
like you can just pull whatever threads you want to weave them together. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
without having the whole story, you can create connections between many things, but just picking, sort of cherry picking, because there's
Hmm.
so much there. There's so much time and space and events, like whatever that have happened. Anyway, I just think that's the danger of people when they reflect on history or create narratives around anything historical,
Oh, definitely. And
oversimplifying what's gone on to and creating the narrative they want to, of
yeah,
course.
and that happened to me so much when I was doing this Templar Knights thing because it's over 200 years. It's like, think back to what, 18, I just forgot what year we're in. So think back to 1821 and think of all the stuff that's happened in between, and then try follow, like, say there's a group of people that lasted that 200 years and you go back and you look at what they're doing, and it's so easy to get sidetracked in history. That's the hardest thing for me about learning about this stuff is like today I was reading something on Wikipedia
Hmm.
about these specific crimes, like because it said John the Baptist or whatever, and then this head, and then it said that one of the other idols that they worshipped were effigies of Baphomet, and I was like, oh, crazy. So I just went down this rabbit hole on Baphomet, and I was like, kind of got lost. I was like, there's so much here. I don't want to bring this whole giant other nugget of stuff and drop it in the Templar Knights episode, because it's like Baphomet was kind of first mentioned with the Templar Knights, and then it's like you get into all this stuff, and then it's like the history of Baphomet is like you try to find out where it is, and it goes back here and back here, and there's all these different theories. But okay, I'll get back to my notes so that we can. Okay, we'll get back on track. I
Yeah.
know how much you guys all love my digressions, but I'm going to jump back in to the idol worship loop, but I'm still going to talk about Baphomet a bit, and that's going to be our segue back to the main timeline, because as well as this head that they had. Oh, another thing too, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about heads before. One of the weird, grotesque things they had was um they would have, you know how I mentioned like the relics, like the piece of the cross, the piece of Jesus's crown of thorns and stuff. One of the things that they would keep these relics in is like skulls that were gilded with silver. So it'd be like you'd have like this dope ass skull that was all like had silver attached to it, and then the top of it would open up, and then you put your like little piece of the cross and stuff in there, and that's where you kept your like relics. And some of these Templar houses had those in it.
It's like something you would like now if I if I would let you
Oh,
decorate our
dude.
house with that.
Uh if I had a piece of the actual cross and it had magical powers, I would definitely keep it in a dead skull. Okay, here's a theoretical question. I somehow get a hold of this mummified severed head of John the Baptist. Can I put it on the mantle?
No. Hard no. No
But
heads in
it's
the
but it's
house.
like high relic and super potent, like Christian magic.
All this good vibes, just someone's head bringing good vibes to the whole home.
Well, it's John the
No.
Baptist. That guy was like king good vibes. He was
Yeah.
like, hey, everybody, we're having a dance party because Jesus is coming. Woo woo. And everybody's like, man, I love that John the Baptist. He's always talking about good stuff, and this guy coming from the sky and saving all of our sins and basically washing away all the bad stuff that humanity's done just so we can all go to heaven. Like, that sounds like a cool dude.
Yeah.
I want part of that
Why
hype train,
is his head even separate from his body though? Why did
because
somebody
he
even do?
died 1300 years before this.
Yeah, but they cut his head.
Yeah, but
Oh,
the head's kind of
like,
like ceremonial. The head is the most important part, and you don't want to like carry this like 6 foot corpse around with you and stuff, and it'd be hard to hold, and you couldn't like hide it in a cupboard. But if you have just the head, you could just
that's
like
easy
put,
enough.
yeah, you could hide that in the back of your sock drawer. Just put some underwear on top of it, and nobody's gonna find it. But you
I'm
can't
never
hide a
looking in your
body.
sock drawer.
There is definitely no severed heads in my sock drawer. Please
Yeah.
don't move my underwear. You will not find a severed head under my underwear.
Could you imagine?
Would
Anyway, no heads in the apartment.
could you imagine I'm at work and you're like, oh, I'll just put this thing in Dale's sock drawer, and then you just find a head? What would you do? Would you just call the police immediately?
I mean, it depends how old it is, I guess. If it was
What?
like,
How does the age difference? Like,
if it was mummified or if it was fresh. If it's mummified, I'm not sure what I call.
oh
Maybe I
yeah,
would call a museum instead. If it's
be
John
like,
the Baptist, I'd probably call the church.
yeah, the Vatican or the Catholic SWAT team would probably raid our place if
Yeah,
they
they
found out I
might.
had John the Baptist head. But that would be pretty dope for them to show their face in public and be like the secret police of the Vatican. I mean, it
Yeah,
might be
you think
worth
they
it.
have?
It might be worth it just to see what those guys look like.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Anyway, no.
will not get John the Baptist's severed head.
Okay. Thank
Fine.
you.
You
I
win
think
this
it
one,
kind of
Andrea.
belongs to, yeah. I think it kind of belongs to like a larger community than just
Hmm.
us anyway. It should be like out there. I don't know. If people are
Yeah,
going to have it, should be maybe in a church where people can
this would be the best.
see it.
This is the best plot for a movie is I'm just like on my way to work. I stop somewhere. I see this thing. It'd be like the way Jim Carrey found the mask in the movie The Mask. He just like saw it on the bridge, off the bridge. He's like, "Hey, what's that?" And he goes and finds it. I would just be like, "Hey, what's that?" And it'd be the severed, mummified head of John the Baptist. And then I get it. And then all these like secret societies come out of the woodwork and start chasing me, like the secret Templar Knights that might still be around. Who knows?
Mhm.
Some say they are, some say they aren't. The Freemasons, whatever. Like,
Yeah. I have a lot of
yeah.
questions now about worshiping a head though. Because to
Mhm.
me, like, if there is a soul or if there is like energy to human beings, so whatever, if you're a healer, that kind of stuff, I still feel like the seat of your consciousness and your power is in your brain.
Mhm.
So once you're dead, your brain is organic matter and it will also decay.
Yeah.
So do they feel like the powers are there? Is the
It
brain
could
still in
be.
that head or has it decayed? Does the brain
Well,
have to be there for it to be a magical head?
that's a good point, and it doesn't specify because Egyptian mummies they remove the brain, but this one it just says it's a mummified head. It doesn't say that it was mummified in the style of Egypt with the brain
Oh.
removed. But I see what you mean. Like you could think of like so if you're like high Christian person who has the severed head of John the Baptist, then you would all obviously believe in souls and like Christian magic or whatever the proper term for that would be.
I'm gonna
Maybe
let you call it magic because you grew up so Christian that I feel like seriously, I feel like there's things, that can be offensive to Christian people, but since you actually grew up
mhm.
that, you can say you kind of get a pass if you want to insult the community you came from
Yeah,
or
okay.
offend them.
I want to call it Christian magic, not because that's what Christians call it, but that's what I'm referring to would be described as just magic. So you have
Spiritual
so
belief, no?
yeah, basically you want to get like whatever magical powers would be held by the soul of John the Baptist. Maybe the brain would act as an anchor, like a trace point, where if you're going to do some sort of magical ceremony to pull whatever John the Baptist essence or his magical powers, you could pull them to from the great beyond, pull them through the head, and then you could get like magical John the Baptist powers, be the best hype man that's ever lived. I don't know what magical powers John the Baptist would have besides being Jesus's hype man.
Oh, baptizing people, but he needed water.
Well, that's true. Okay, back on
Who
point.
knows? Mm.
Pop it back into this Baphomet thing. So, um, with a way to stop from getting sidetracked yet again, I'm just going to do some more reading because that'll get me through the whole point without going off on a half-hour tangent about John the Baptist's magical powers.
Plus, my dinner's almost ready.
Okay. So, here's what I'll read this thing from this is a little Wikipedia thing from the Baphomet page because I kind of just wanted to go see what they said about it and get like maybe like a proper wording from an official source. Oh, and for all intents purposes, I consider Wikipedia an official source because everything's cited, and if it's wrong, some nerd somewhere will correct it. But you will find errors in there, but they're only temporary. But you can find errors in textbooks. So going forward, I'm just going to say Wikipedia is an official source. If you don't believe that or whatever, then you're probably not listening to this podcast to begin with. Okay. The name Baphomet comes up in several of these confessions, talking about the Templar Knight confessions. Peter Partner states in his 1987 book, The Knights Templar and Their Myth, in the trial of Templars, one of their main charges was their supposed worship of a heathen idol head known as Baphomet. The description of the object changed from confession to confession. Some Templars denied any knowledge of it. Others, under torture, described it as being either a severed head, a cat, or a head with three faces, which is dope, which is crazy
Those are all very different, by the
because
way.
the logo for the show is a tri-face skull. Oh my God, I didn't even know that when I made that logo. I just thought I drew that logo because there's some like trippy artist now who does tri-face, and he did some art for Tool and stuff, and I like that. And I was like, one day I was like, oh, that'd be dope if I drew a tri-face skull. So I drew that skull. Then I made it the logo for this podcast, and now it comes up in the documents. This is what I mean by drawing connections. It's all connected. I just red pilled myself again. Am I reading too much into that coincidence, do you think?
I'm not sure what to say about that.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll back you
no
crazy
comment.
up.
No
Okay.
comment. We already joke about you being a past life knight anyway, so whatever.
Maybe I
There we go.
was. Oh my God, maybe I'm so into this like whole like sexy scene because I was one of the guys who did it. I was like getting young early 20s men to swear themselves to Christ, and then I was kissing their spine and their navel.
Oh, don't joke about being a creep, honey.
That's not a creep.
Yes, it is. You're creeping if you're in a position of authority, yeah, and
I
you're
didn't say it
convincing
was
people
okay,
to
fine.
let
I did
them.
not in a past life, I would never have taken
If it,
advantage of
yes,
young nubile men who are trying to swear themselves to a cause bigger than
I mean, at least they're
themselves.
in their 20s. They're not minors, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, and another thing they might have said was that this head that everybody says is something else. They said some people said it might have been the head of the original Grandmaster Hugh de Pine, who was
Beautiful.
the first Templar Knight. Um, the claims of an idol named Baphomet were unique to the Inquisition of the Templars. Like, that's what I was saying was this was the first time you saw the name Baphomet come up in history. So yeah, those are all the idols that they were worshiping. So let's get back to this big picture. So I was saying that Pope Clement V, he was uneasy with this whole thing. So before, when I teased you by saying he did a little loophole thing, was what, how did I get distracted on that? Oh my God. I'm like telling about this point I'm going to make. And then I remember I was about to make it before, but then I went off on 45 minutes worth of tangents. Okay. So what happened was King Phil, I'm sorry I led you guys in a fucking huge circle. Or you're welcome if you enjoyed the trip. So King Philip, he got um jurisdiction over these Templar Knights because he said they did heresy. Oh, and then I got into all the crimes that they did. So he got over them. And but like I said in episodes 1 and 2, the knights were only supposed to answer to the Pope. So what Clement did as kind of an underhanded way was he said that the papacy was going to take charge of the crimes and investigate it themselves. So what happens was it's kind of a good thing, but also kind of a bad thing, because for Clement to take over and charge the Templars under the papacy, he has to charge all Templars, because before this, up until now, this was only in France, and this was only the Templar Knights of France. So what Clement does is he says he's charging all these knights, and he's going to do like a trial and an investigation. That means not all this torture bullshit that King Philip was doing. So, but to do this, he has to charge all the Templar Knights across all of the country. So they send letters to like Portugal, England, Europe, I already said that, Germany, Constantinople, and all this stuff. And but basically every other country beside France was like, yeah, these were the good guys. We're not putting them in jail. For 200 years, they were being like the cool dudes. So what happened was a lot of the other countries, they were like, look, you guys can join other orders and deal with the church in other ways. Like they just stopped being Templar Knights, but they changed their name. Some of them were kind of retired, where they're like, here's your, like, if you're older, they would like give you like a little plot of land and you could retire on that. And then when, and this is also King Clement giving King Philip the screws, because King Philip was doing this to try get out of debt, but he also, what I talked about in the first two episodes was that the Templar Knights had amassed all this land and castles and forts and stuff. What Clement was going to do, or what he did do eventually, was all of the Templar Knights holdings and funds and everything went to the Knights Hospitaller, because it was kind of like, well, these people were doing all this stuff to serve God, so we're going to give it to the other people who are serving God. And so I guess in a way, the two orders were combined, not because the Templar Knights and the Hospitallers became one thing, but the Templar Knights disappeared, but the Hospitallers got all their stuff. So King Philip got nothing. Good, because he's a jerk. But this stopped all the torture, which is good. And one thing that happened was, as soon as the torture stopped, all the Templar Knights were like, yeah, we only said that bullshit because we were being tortured, and that we don't mean it and stuff. And a lot of them would say, yeah, I spit on the cross once, but I didn't have sex with anybody. So they kind of took it back. And then when I said before that, I think what was the final straw for Clement, for him to actually enact this and end the torture and stuff, was Philip, in kind of like a show of force, he took 50 knights who had recounted their confessions during torture, and he said they had returned to heresy, which was a capital crime at the time, which means they were put to death. So he burned 50 of the people alive, and I think that's why Clement was like, yo, this is nuts. You're way out of hand. The Pope don't abide. So he stopped it. And then, yeah. And then, yeah, so this is kind of like the gray area where this is like 1308. Everything's winding down. And then, okay, this is what it is. So Pope Clement issues the papal bull Pastoralis Preeminente on, this was
You're
November.
so good at pronouncing some of these words.
I was just trying, it's Latin. I was just trying to stumble over it and just hope nobody noticed, but it's Pastoralis, Preeminentiae. So that's Preeminentiae. There you go. I speak Latin. This is
Okay.
So this instructs all the Christian monarchs in Europe to arrest all their Templars and seize their assets. And then Pope Clement called for papal hearings to determine the Templars' guilt or innocence. Okay, so in 1310, having appointed the Archbishop of Sens, Philip de Marigny, to lead the investigation, Philip blocked this attempt using previously forced concessions to have done. Okay, this is sorry. Before when I said all that, I misspoke. What happened was, so Pope Clement, he issues this papal bull like a month or so after. So I guess they were only being tortured for like a month or so, which, I mean, a month is a long time if you're getting tortured, but it's less than years. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry I have to do this, but I have to take back what I said before. So what actually happened was Clement issues the papal bull, arrests all the Templar Knights, and then he once these papal hearings are called, then the Templar Knights start denouncing stuff. And then King Philip, because he's a dickhead, he takes in 1310, he blocked the attempt for this, like he blocked this Philip de Sens from getting a hold of some of these prisoners because he was scared that, I guess, they would say they were innocent or whatever. And he takes them and he burns them alive at the stake in Paris. And then with Philip threatening military action unless the Pope complied with his wishes, Pope Clement finally agrees to disband the order. So as this trial is happening, he says, I'm disbanding the Templar Knights. And citing the public scandal that had been generation. So basically, Clement is like, this scandal's too big. The Templar Knights name is ruined. Like nobody's going to trust the Templar Knights again after this anyway.
Mm.
So at the Council of Vienne in 1312, he issued a series of papal bulls. And this is when the Templar Knights are officially dissolved. So this is the official end of the Templar Knights, but you could say the end of the Templar Knights was in 1307 when they got arrested and all this bullshit started because they kind of weren't allowed to do any other Templar Knight stuff. And then Clement took all their stuff. But now they're done. So you're asking yourself, what happened to Jack Malay, the Grand Master? Well, this is the sad part of the story because he's still in prison and he had still confessed and he was tortured and he confessed and he retracted his confessions. Um, but like I said before, there's this dumb thing where if you get tortured and you confess to something, you confess to heresy, but then you take it back and say you didn't do the heresy, then you're considered a relapsed heretic and then you're just murdered. So Grandmaster Jacques Demolay is sentenced to burn alive at the stake in Paris on the 18th of March, the year 1314. Demolay reportedly remained defiant to the end, asking to be tied in such a way that he could face the Notre Dame Cathedral and hold his hands together in prayer. It's getting pretty emotional.
Mm.
According to legend, he called out from the flames that both Pope Clement and King Philip would die soon and meet him before God. His actual words were recorded on the parchment. It doesn't say which parchments. I think that the parchment they're talking about is, no, it would have been Shinon because I was day before. Sorry. Now I tripped up this whole emotional good thing. Okay. So his actual words were recorded on parchment. I'm not even going to try read the French version. I'm just going to tell you the English translation. And this is what, as he's being burned alive, engulfed in flames, Demolay says, God knows who is right, who is wrong, and has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death. And then he dies. And you know what? You know how I said there was a happy ending before? There's another happy ending because both Pope Clement and King Philip died within the year. Now you could say it was the curse, but King Philip died within the year because of a hunting accident. But the Pope died within that month.
Yeah.
He died of old age. Some say he died of like the stress of this whole thing and the way it weighed on his heart and like the whole sadness and trauma and stuff. But yeah, so that's the end of the Papal Knights, or not the Papal Knights, the Templar Knights. I guess we could talk about. Oh, one thing was, I'll just read this thing from Portugal. So in 1319, Portugal Templars were absorbed into the Order of Christ under the protection of the Portuguese King Denis, who refused to persecute the former knights, as in most other states under the influence of the Catholic Church. Denis revived the Templars of Tomar as the Orders of Christ, grateful for their aid during the Reconquista and in the reconstruction of Portugal after the wars. So the Reconquista was that thing where they're taking back Spain and Portugal from the Muslims who had invaded from their own kind of crusade like 400 years before this. So that's nice. So the Order of Christ became the that's what the Templar Knights became in Portugal. Oh, do you want to know something else? If you trace like the Templar Knights, because they like Templar Knights were disbanded, but the like members like here they were renamed the Order of Christ. In other areas they went into different stuff. And if you trace down the lineage to today, St. John's Ambulance is connected back to them. Like St. John's Ambulance is an offshoot. It's kind of like the descendant of the Hospitallers.
Oh.
So that's why it's like
Emergency.
yeah, it's like volunteer emergency stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, international and stuff.
Oh.
The Freemasons also trace their roots. It's kind of like the Freemasons are like, we're from the Templar Knights, but that's kind of just them saying that. But the Freemasons weren't made until the 1700s, and
Oh.
they said the way they said it was that the Freemasons came out of the stonemasons, and the stonemasons were basically just kind of like the union group of the Masons, and they were the ones who built all the churches and fortresses for the Freemasons. So they're kind of saying they interconnected, and Templar Knights became stonemasons to hide, and then they turned into Freemasons.
Okay.
So let me see. Some say that the Templar Knights became the Rosicrucians, which you could look into. And then what I was talking about, that fun guy Scott Wolter was saying that during the time, so one of the things that they're saying, like when Pope Clement sent out the order for all the Christian kings and stuff to arrest the Templar Knights, they're saying that was when a lot of the Templar Knights escaped. And they're saying that some of them escaped to the New World because there's this like, oh yeah, we watched the Da Vinci Code. And in the Da Vinci Code, one of the things was that the Templar Knights were in charge of guarding the Holy Grail, which, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Da Vinci's Code, was the lineage of Christ. So what the Scott Wolter guy was saying was that the Templar Knights, who were in charge of guarding the descendants of Jesus, took the descendants to the New World and interbred them with First Nations people to keep the bloodline alive. And yeah, but
I
we
wonder
have,
which, because obviously
sorry,
there's different tribes, right?
yeah,
I wonder specifically which ones, because I am indigenous, we know,
mm-hmm,
through my mother.
yeah.
So I'm just wondering if
It would have
They think we would
been
all have that connection, or it's just one particular community.
okay. I will tell you, most likely it would have been on the East Coast because they landed in there. But there's uh, Minnesota is one of the spots because there's this thing called the Kensington Runestone, which supposedly says it's like this slab, this 200-pound slab of rock that was found in Minnesota in 1898 that supposedly says that um, people came over from England and stuff before Christopher Columbus. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's this thing called Newport Tower, which this Scott Wolter guy said is proof that the Templar Knights were here because there's like the thing is tiny and it looks like an old stone mill. I'll put a picture up on this. If you're listening to this, you can go on YouTube and watch it and I'll put up a poster. Or you could just Google Newport Tower and you could see it's this tiny thing. But he was saying that this was uh built by the Templar Knights and that when the sun, I think it's the sun on the spring solstice, shines through the window and illuminates this like egg thing, which is supposedly some sort of like symbol that they worshipped at the time. But yeah, if you want to hear some of that stuff, I recommend going and listening to the Scott Wolter episode of Earth Ancients. He talks about all this stuff. And
I
then,
just looked it up because I had to know too.
oh
At
yeah,
least I
did you?
wanted to see a picture. It's on Rhode Island.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, and it looks like a dinky little stone mill. Like it's like
Yeah. And they're
because
saying, sorry, who did they say built that? Not the indigenous people, but
like the Templar
the
Knights or
Templar.
whatever.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was gonna give her, I guess I'm not qualified to say it, but I looked at it and I just thought that doesn't really look like my people's building.
No, it is. It
Everything I
it is
No, it's
impressive for the
very,
time, but
very English looking or something.
the way Scott Wolter described it, I was expecting like fucking like holy shit. But I was like, I guess it's like a rock mill. Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you have any?
Mm.
That's it. Templar Knights are done. I can move on to what I don't know what I'm going to talk about next yet. I was thinking, actually, I have an idea. I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want to commit it to the ether because before I do another multi-part series like the Templar Knights, I kind of want to do a one-off. Yeah. In the back, ma'am, you have a question?
Yeah, just over here, I just thought this was kind of interesting on the whole Templar Knights thing, though some sources are calling it Knights Templar, eh? Not Templar Knights.
Mm,
So I don't
yeah,
know.
they have. It's a bunch of different ways. Like you're saying they're calling them Templar Knight or Knights Templar.
Knights Templar. This article that I found is from GQ magazine, the British version.
Mm-hmm.
It is 10 things you never knew about the Knights Templar. I just thought some of the points were kind
Okay,
of
yeah.
funny.
Um, they are known as both. I just pulled up the Wikipedia for
Yeah.
Knights Templar, and they call them the Knights Templar. But they're also called Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. That's like the full unabridged name.
Mm, okay.
Yeah, so they're also known as the Order of Solomon's Temple, which sounds badass. They're called Knights Templar or Templar Knights, or sometimes they're even just called Templars. And
Okay.
then yeah, I mean, if you haven't gotten your fill of Templar Knights information from these 3 podcast episodes, definitely go check it out because Templar Knights, like I think I mentioned in episode 1, they're what made me stop hating history once I found out about them because I remember learning about history in high school and it was my least favorite of all the subjects because it was boring and shitty And the only time it was interesting was when it was fucking horrible. And this was when I was like, because it's like, I mentioned it before, but when you're in high school in like grade 9 or whatever in social studies, the first big Canadian thing is you learn about urbanization. And that was just when people stopped being farmers and moved to cities. And it's like the least interesting thing. And nothing really happened in Canada. The US, you kind of get some interesting history. Like when you go back to the old, like the New World, when they first started coming over here, like the Pilgrims, like there's like, you can look it up. There's like, um, what is it called? There's like supposedly a Stone Age, or not Stone Age, a Stonehenge over there in New England somewhere and stuff. So they have interesting stuff like that. Canada has nothing. It's basically like, well, they found dinosaurs here other than that. So it's like, I was always super down on history. And then I heard about the Knights Templar and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then after that, I started listening to people like Dan Carling, who does hardcore history. And when he talks about history, it's good stuff. So I guess I'm emotionally attached to the Knights Templar because
Mm-hmm.
they're why
Sounds
I
like
like
it.
history now.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you weighed out everything, they're still good guys. I mean, there is no good guys or bad guys in wars because it's just people who want something trying to take it from each other. But like, I do like, I was joking with Andrea, I do like how they insisted on making no noise when they were eating and they weren't even allowed to talk. They had to do hands. They taught that they had like this, I don't know what it was, but like I don't know what the symbols were, but they had a specific we're eating sign language that they would do to each other to ask for like more cutlery, more milk or water or more of the other stuff, and they would just eat in silence. And they did no small talk whatsoever. And they're basically just gruff, quiet dudes who just fucking did their work. And it
Oh,
was dope.
stale, hard.
But
The dinner table and everywhere else.
yeah, which is awesome. But at the same time, they weren't allowed to let their peacock feathers show and they couldn't strut. And they had to be plain.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet they didn't like bad jokes like I would be making. Like part of me, it's like I'm always torn because on one hand, I just want to be quiet and left alone. But on the other hand, I want to play grab ass and fuck around. So it's like this constant inner war of my two personalities.
They
And one
probably
side would
did
do
it
really
too.
good as a Templar Knight, but on the other side,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a good sitcom. Me as a Templar Knight. But
I
yeah, I
wanted
guess,
I
yeah,
wanted
sorry.
to that article that I brought up though, I actually wanted to say some of the 10 things because I thought this was like clever, sort of cleverly put
Mm-hmm.
together and a little bit like interesting and funny. And it's kind of like how you said they're related to St. John's Ambulance. The number one point is the Templars were the original roadside rescue service. I'm going to read these to you actually because
Yeah, read them.
yeah, because
Give it to
you
us.
have this history. I'm not going to read the paragraphs under each point, like all the
Mm-hmm.
write up,
Yeah.
but I'm going to read you the points and see if they do anything for you. Number 2 is Templar dress code was pretty basic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like I mentioned, they weren't allowed to have shoes with laces or have pointy shoes.
Yeah,
Which,
the pointy shoes. Yeah, I remember that now.
which I'm okay without pointy shoes, but I do like a bright colored shirt. Okay, give us your next
Yeah.
one.
You know, it says there those pointed shoes. It says they were not allowed to wear gloves or pointed lace-up shoes since these abominable things belong to pagans. So that's what their belief was about those.
Hmm.
Number 3, Templar discipline was harsh.
Yeah,
So they were
there
hard
was
on each other.
there
Yeah.
was no grab ass in the
Flogging.
Templar Knights.
No, it says they flogged for minor infractions.
Like Jerk
And
each other off or like hit each other with paddles?
I'm assuming flogging, which is like is that not a whip though?
I think,
I think
yeah,
the
I
flogging
think
is an
flogging is
actual whip
whipping. Yeah, that's weird. Why wouldn't they just say whipping?
because they called it flog.
Yeah, that's true. I think flogging,
A smart answer, right?
you know what?
'Cause they called it flog.
I
They just
don't know
called
at
it something.
all, but what I'm gonna say is I think it's called flogging. Like the term flogging includes whipping, caning, hitting with a paddle. Um,
Yeah, it might. Because
oh,
that's in
okay,
the
here.
Bible, is it not? It's
Yeah,
like a biblical thing, like
I
people
just
flogging.
Googled it
Yeah,
quickly.
self-flogging.
Flogging, also called whipping or caning, a beating
Yeah.
administered with a whip or rod. Okay, so
Mhm.
basically I was right.
Yeah, any of those. Um, and it says more serious misdemeanors such as fighting or disobeying orders could result in a brother being forced to eat his meals on the floor with dogs for up to a year.
A year?
Yeah, so you get flogged or you eat on the floor with the dogs, even.
I mean,
One
ooh,
of
I
those
wonder.
sounds less painful physically, though, and
Yeah,
yet it's the harder punishment. Isn't that amazing? How like much we need other human beings and like their approval. That the
yeah.
worst scenario is like not being beaten, but being
Honestly,
shunned.
I'm saying you just hit me with a fucking stick. I don't want to eat off the floor with the dogs. I mean, if they're cute, cool dogs, they're not scary war dogs,
Yeah,
then
that's true. I don't know what their dogs were like.
mm,
What if it's like a golden retriever? I'll eat with the
yeah.
dog.
Like if we're talking chihuahuas that are going to lick my face while I'm eating, yeah. But if we're talking like fucking pit bulls who are going to growl at me and try to steal my meal, then no.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. It also says number 4, the Templars' downfall was unlucky, for everyone. So that's the side at least the GQ writers are on.
Oh, I see what they're alluding to there. Oh, also, I want to say, I forgot to mention it, but when I brought up homosexuality was one of the charges that they're saying. One of the things that some of the Templar Knights said when they were tortured was that the elder brothers told them to cohort with other men to save them from screwing around with women. Because one of the things that
Mm.
the Templar Knights had to take a vow of chastity, and they're kind of like they kind of said they were saying like if you're gonna stray, don't hook up with some girl, just hook up with each other.
You know
If you
what?
have to, but don't.
That was probably just because they didn't want any random little babies out there for these guys,
Hmm.
because then it potentially takes them away from their duties.
Yeah,
Probably doesn't really have anything to do with, I don't know, anything
yeah.
else.
Which is weird because it was like the Templar Knights had the sergeants and the brothers, like I'd said in I think that was episode 1, where the brothers couldn't have wives and they had to take the vow of chastity, but the sergeants were
The
like
higher
not.
ups, right?
No,
Could?
the sergeants were lower down,
Oh, lower down. Okay.
but they were allowed to still have wives and stuff. So they should have just been like, look, if you can't contain it or whatever, you get stripped from being a brother to a sergeant and you're more of like a support category than being like one of the main dudes
Mm.
instead of like telling them to screw each other. Okay, continue with your list.
Okay. Number 5, the Templars suffered with fake news. This is when Philip attacked the order, his ministers produced a sexed up dossier of
Dossier.
dossier. Hmm. I've never used that word before. Of allegations accusing Templar brothers of spitting on images of Christ, having secret homoerotic induction ceremonies, and worshiping statues. So you already talked about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, fake news.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Oh my God. GQ, be better. That was terrible.
What? I thought
Just
that was
like
actually kind of funny.
making the fake news joke.
I thought it was kind of funny. Not gonna lie.
All right.
Because they actually did. It's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
So, yeah. And even that one person was writing stuff down. You said he was trying to sell booklets about fake
He
news.
was. Yeah.
So that's fake news. It's exactly
Yeah.
what we have today. It's written, but it's untrue.
Fake news has been around for 700 years.
Yeah. I mean, really, it's just gossip and lying, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
But
probably been
written.
around since the written word existed.
Yeah. The Templars were legends in their own lifetimes. That's number 6. That's, I think, pretty obvious. Oh, but then they talk about let me just read you this chunk because you need to know this to know number 7. Popular fascination with the Templars goes back to well before the age of cinema and video games. It began around 1200 AD when a German poet called Wolfram von Eschenbach was writing his version of the King Arthur stories and decided to include some knights called the Templars in his story as guardians of a mysterious object called the Grail. Then number 7 is which didn't really exist. So they're saying like the Holy Grail was a metaphor for Jerusalem, basically, cooked up by medieval romance writers like this Eschenbach. So there we go.
Okay. Also, the Templar Knights protecting the Holy Grail was from also in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh, and Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
Which I did not finish watching this time, but I did watch it actually many years ago when it first came out.
I thought you finished watching that with me.
No, I went to bed, remember? And then I didn't finish the other half. Yeah. But I remember.
Did you at least get to see Paul Bettany run around all horny and naked? He was the blonde guy.
Yeah, I know who he was.
Yeah.
I don't remember the part you're talking about. I remember seeing him like torture himself with the little thigh wrap.
Flagellate
and
himself.
Yes,
Flagellate?
and that too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was the part. He did that when he was naked.
I always thought that movie was so beautiful because of how she helped that person never go back to, or she didn't necessarily help them never go back to using drugs, but she did something with a person who had addictions, drug addictions in the park, I think, and maybe took their drugs.
Oh, yeah. She went there and she bought all this stuff from him, all his like
yeah.
garbage.
And I always thought that was because if Jesus is real, that to me is beautiful. Just that kind of healing. I just want that for everybody. So
yeah, like I guess so in the movie it turns out that she is the descendant of Jesus, and her curing him of his heroin addiction would have been one of her miracles. Okay.
Yeah, which is good. Number 8, the Templars inspired Star Wars. Number 9, and
whoa.
What?
You're not just gonna gloss over the Templar Knights
inspiring Star Wars?
Yeah, please read me that paragraph, ma'am.
It's a very short paragraph. Okay. It says, for some reason I didn't think this was that interesting, but I guess I'm not a Star Wars fan, so that would be why.
Andrea, the type of dudes who listen to podcasts are also the type of dudes who are mega horny for Star Wars, and I don't want to disservice any of my fans.
Okay. So number 8, the Templars inspired Star Wars. The original Star Wars films were strongly influenced by George Lucas's interest in the Middle Ages. Apparently, early scripts referred to the Jedi Templars rather than the Jedi Knights.
Oh my God. This fucking changes everything. Oh!
I love that didn't register to me at all. I was like, skip this one. This is boring. Yeah. And you're like, what?
It's like, you're like, oh, whatever. That show that only boys like if the fucking Jedi are future Templar Knights, oh, that makes so much sense. Oh, it makes so much sense. Especially if you watch the series Clone Wars, because they go into all how the Jedi aren't picking sides, but they just help whichever side they feel is just. Oh, okay. I see it.
You felt that, eh? You got it?
That cuts deep. That's a big one.
Okay, well, I'm glad I could help you with that today. I'm glad I could bring that to your world. I know. I thought this was a pretty good little article.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you insisted on reading it.
And then it says number 9 and Game of Thrones. So also inspired Game of Thrones. Are you as interested in that?
Not as much, but I'm sure someone will be. So please read that.
Okay. And what about the Night's Watch who guard the Night's Watch? Okay, is that in Game of Thrones? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen the show. So anyway, and what about the Night's Watch who guard the wall in the world's biggest TV show? George R.R. Martin borrowed heavily from medieval history in creating the world of Westeros. In The Night's Watch, he depicted an order of all male warriors in eye-catching uniforms, sworn to chastity and devoted to a life defending the kingdom from a menace on its borders. That's the Templars all over.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
This number 10 is actually the one that I thought was the most interesting.
Okay.
Today, the Templars are drug barons. Plenty of people have tried to revive or reinvent the Templar movement, from Christian charities and the Freemasons to far-right Islamophobic hate groups in Eastern Europe. For 6 years, the Mexican government has been fighting a drug cartel called Los Caballeros Templarios, the Knights Templar, who model themselves on the medieval Templars with their own code of conduct that governs how members should behave, and a bracingly medieval approach to discipline and punishment.
Crazy. Okay,
Mhm.
is that the end of your
That's
list?
it. That's it.
All right. It's hard. So it's been such a long journey with these Templar Knights. It's hard to just know to end it. But
Mhm.
thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you for coming with me on this journey, Andrea. I know I probably got pretty boring at times, but hey, one man's trash is another man's treasure, i.e., what you might find boring, I find super interesting. And I'm glad you made it through all the dick jokes.
I don't think you actually did that many.
I know.
So
There probably would have
thankfully,
been more if I was doing this by myself. I would have gotten way off
while
track.
you're
I probably would have talked about like the ceremonies where they kissed each other for like 2 hours.
yeah, I'm glad that we kept it a bit tighter than
Yeah.
that. Good, and you're welcome. Always always like learning myself.
Nice.
So, and I just wanted to be a nice girlfriend.
Aw, you are a nice girlfriend.
Yes, I
Giving
am
up your Saturday night to do
supportive.
this podcast with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's very nice of you. Okay, I'm gonna end it there. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Take care. Hope you learned lots. Send Dale your questions.
Yes, I made my oh yeah.
And corrections if you have any.
Contact me at aberant@gmail.com. Leave comments under this video. I don't know. Please rate and review, subscribe, do all that good stuff. I still haven't set up a Patreon, but I'm gonna try. Okay, bye. That's it. Just